Hey you guys, it's Miss B. I am here to read chapter 4 of Charlotte's Web. Typically I would read 2 chapters, but last time I only read 1, and I'm trying to stay at pace with that comprehension page packet that I sent you, and they go by 2 chapters. So anyways, I'm just going to read chapter 4 today. Let's think back to the 3 chapters so far. In chapter 1, Fern convinces her dad to keep the runt pig, and he becomes her pet, and she names him Wilbur. And then by chapter 2, her dad says that he's pretty grown now and needs to be on a farm with more land. And so then she decides that she's going to let her uncle have him because he has a farm. And then go to chapter 3, and that's when Wilbur is at her Uncle Homer's house, and Mr. Zuckerman and Mrs. Zuckerman are the aunt and uncle. And I think that's when Wilbur decided that he was going to get loose and run around. So that's about where we are. Chapter 4, Loneliness. The next day was rainy and dark. Rain fell on the roof of the barn, and it dripped steadily from the eaves. Rain fell in the barnyard and ran in crooked courses down into the lane where thistles and pigweed grew. Rain splattered against Mrs. Zuckerman's kitchen windows and came gushing out of the downspouts. Rain fell on the backs of the sheep as they grazed in the meadow. When the sheep were tired of standing in the rain, they walked slowly up the lane and into the fold. Rain upset Wilbur's plans. Wilbur had planned to go out this day and dig a new hole in the yard. He had other plans too. His plans for the day went something like this. Breakfast at 6:30, skim milk, crust, middlings, bits of donuts, wheat cakes with drops of maple syrup sticking to them, potato skins, leftover custard pudding with raisins and bits of shredded wheat. Breakfast would be finished around 7, and from 7 to 8, Wilbur planned to have a talk with Templeton, which was the rat that lived under his trough. Talking with Templeton was not the most interesting occupation in the world, but it was better than nothing. From 8 to 9, Wilbur planned to take a nap outside in the sun. And from 9 to 11, he planned to dig a hole or trench and possibly find something good to eat buried in the dirt. From 11 to 12, he planned to stand still and watch flies on the boards, watch bees in the clover, and watch swallows in the air. 12 o'clock, lunchtime. Middlings, warm water, apple parings, meat gravy, carrot scrapings, meat scraps, the wrapper off of a package of cheese. Lunch would be over by 1. From 1 to 2, Wilbur planned to sleep. From 2 to 3, he planned to scratch itchy places by rubbing against the fence. And from 3 to 4, he planned to stand perfectly still and think of what it was like to be alive and to wait for Fern. At 4 would come supper. Skim milk, leftover sandwich from Larry's lunch, prune skins, a morsel of this, a bit of that, fried potatoes, marmalade drippings, a little more of this, a little more of that, a piece of baked apple, a scrap of upside-down cake. Wilbur had gone to sleep thinking about these plans. He woke up at 6, saw the rain, and it seemed as though he just couldn't bear it. I get everything all beautifully planned out, and it has to go and rain, he says. For a while, he stood gloomily indoors. I'm going to stop right there, and I want you to think about what gloomily means. For a while, he stood gloomily indoors. So if you said gloomily is something like sadly, that's what it means. Then he walked to the door and he looked out. Drops of rain struck his face. His yard was cold and wet. Templeton was nowhere to be seen. "Are you out there, Templeton?" yelled Wilbur. There was no answer. Suddenly, Wilbur felt lonely and friendless. "One day, just like another," he groaned. "I'm very young. I have no real friends here in the barn. And it's going to rain all morning and all afternoon, and Fern won't come in such bad weather." So how do you guys think Wilbur's feeling right now? It's a gloomy day, so his plans were ruined. He can't find Templeton to talk to. No one else will talk to him. If you're thinking maybe he's sad, kind of feeling under the weather, maybe in the blue zone, as we would say, then you're right. Oh, honestly. And Wilbur was crying again for the second time in 2 days. At 6:30, Wilbur heard the banging of a pail. Lurvy was standing outside in the rain, stirring up breakfast. "Come on, pig," said Lurvy, but Wilbur did not budge. Lurvy dumped the slops, scraped the pail, and walked away. He noticed something was wrong with the pig. Wilbur didn't want any food. He wanted love. He wanted a friend, someone who would play with him. He mentioned this to the goose, who was sitting quietly in a corner of the sheepfold. "Will you come over and play with me?" he asked. "Oh, sorry, Sonny," said the goose. "I'm sitting on my eggs, 8 of them. I gotta keep them toasty-oasty warm. I have to stay right here." "I'm no flibbertigibbet. I don't play when there are eggs to hatch. I'm expecting gooselings." "Well, I didn't think you were expecting woodpeckers," said Wilbur bitterly. Wilbur tried one of the lambs next. "Will you please play with me?" he asked. "Certainly not," said the lamb. "In the first place, I cannot get into your pen, as I'm not old enough to jump over the fence. In the second place, I'm not interested in pigs. Pigs mean less than nothing to me." "What do you mean less than nothing?" replied Wilbur. "I don't think there's any such thing as less than nothing. Nothing is absolutely the limit of nothingness. It is the lowest that you can go. It is the end of the line. So how can something be less than nothing? If there were something that was less than nothing, then nothing would be nothing. It would be something, even though it's just a very little bit of something. But if nothing is nothing, then nothing has nothing that is less than it is." "Oh, be quiet," said the lamb. "Go play by yourself. I don't play with pigs, okay?" Sadly, Wilbur lay down and just listened to the rain. Soon he saw the rat climbing down a slanting board he used as a stairway. "Will you play with me, Templeton?" asked Wilbur. Here's Wilbur talking to the lamb. "Play," said Templeton, twirling his whiskers. "Play? I hardly know the meaning of that word." "Well," said Wilbur, "it means to have fun, to frolic, to run, to skip, to be merry." I never do those things if I can avoid them," replied the rat sourly. "I prefer to spend my time eating, gnawing, spying, hiding. I'm a glutton, but not a merrymaker. Right now, I am on my way to eat your breakfast, since you haven't got enough sense to eat it yourself." And Templeton, the rat, crept stealthily along the wall and disappeared into a private tunnel that he had dug between the door and Wilbur's yard. Templeton was a crafty rat. He had things pretty much his own way. The tunnel was an example of his skill and cunning. The tunnel enabled him to get from the barn to his hiding place under the pig trough without coming out into the open. He had tunnels and runways all over Mr. Zuckerman's farm, and he could get from one place to another without ever being seen. Usually he slept during the day and was abroad only after dark. Was abroad. What do you think that means? The rat was asleep during the day and abroad only after dark. I'll give you a second to think about it. So abroad means like out and about. So he slept during the day and was out and about only when it was dark. Wilbur watched him disappear into the tunnel. In a moment, he saw the rat's sharp nose poke out from underneath his wooden trough. Cautiously, Templeton pulled himself over to the edge. This was almost more than Wilbur could stand. On this dreary, rainy day, to see his breakfast being eaten by somebody else. He knew Templeton was getting soaked out there in the pouring rain, but even that didn't comfort him. He felt friendless, dejected, and hungry. He threw himself down and cried. So why is he crying? I want you to tell somebody near you or just talk to yourself about it. Why is Wilbur crying? So if you said something like because he really wants a friend and no one will play with him, or he's sad that his plans got canceled, you're on the right track. Late that afternoon, Lurvy went to Mr. Zuckerman. "Hey, I think there's something wrong with that pig of yours. He hasn't touched his food." Give him 2 spoonfuls of sulfur and a little molasses," said Mr. Zuckerman. Wilbur couldn't believe what was happening to him when Lurvy caught him and forced the medicine down his throat. This was certainly the worst day of his life. He didn't know whether he could endure the awful loneliness anymore. Here he is crying on the floor. Darkness settled over everything, and soon there were only shadows and the noises of the sheep chewing on their cuds and occasionally the rattle of a cow chain up overhead. You can imagine Wilbur's surprise when out of the darkness came a small voice he had never heard before. It sounded rather thin, but pleasant. "Do you want a friend, Wilbur?" it said. "I'll be a friend to you. I've watched you all day and I like you." "But I can't see you," said Wilbur, jumping to his feet. "Where are you? Who are you?" "Oh, I'm right up here," said the voice. "Go to sleep. You'll see me in the morning." Okay, so that's the end of that chapter. And I want you to make a prediction right now. So again, tell someone near you or just kind of think about it to yourself. Who do you think that voice was? We'll have to find out in the next chapter. I hope you guys enjoyed that, and we'll see you for chapter 5 next. Yeah, that's it. Bye. Libby says bye too.